So I'll stick to the DNA example because I still remember this from BC era. Nobody ever encouraged me to ask, as I began by saying, um, how did you come about this thing you call DNA? How did you find this thing, DNA? How did you characterize this thing, DNA? Right? What did you actually do? No one asked me to do that. Right? Um, and and since then, as you know, I've spent 20 years with doctors, what we call doctors, allopathic practitioners, different kinds of specialists,
Yeah.
right? And I get the distinct impression, in fact, I'm 100% confident that they've never asked that question either. They've gone through exactly the same schooling system as I have.
Yeah.
Right. And why? But why am I saying this? Why is this important? It's important because I'll give you an example. If I want to demonstrate to you, and I like this example, I use it anytime this comes up because I'm a fan of gold, as you know. If I wanted to demonstrate to you that gold exists, something called gold exists, well, I would go to a creek, for example, where I think I might find some gold. Right. I would take my pan and my sieve. I'll take a big scoop of dirt. And then I would separate out the dirt, the twigs and so forth from what I think is gold. I would pick up a little particle called that I think is gold and I would show it to you. So this is what gold is. If I want to go a little bit further, I could get or analytical on it. I can use some spectroscopy, for example, to demonstrate to you that this is the frequency that gold creates. Right? Why am I telling you this? Because that's a passive process. I haven't applied any temperatures. I haven't heated the solution up. I haven't cooled it down. I haven't spun it at pressure. I haven't put it through X-rays or any form of radiation. I haven't added any chemicals. It's a natural process, a passive process where I'm making a claim about something that exists. This is not what they do when they say there's such a thing called DNA.
So what I'm hearing in that is that in general, when an experiment is done, there are a lot of assumptions made, and it is assuming that all those assumptions are intact and that they're actually not. And so we claim to be testing something in its natural environment. We're actually not. And so, those variables, it turns out, are actually meaningful, and they actually matter. Uh, so, we can bias things in any direction we want.
We're changing what we're looking at in this case. In the case of DNA, off the top of my head, they use all sorts of chemicals that come essentially from oil, right? So the petrochemicals. They use acetane, hexane, sodium hydroxide. The solution went under about 60 something plus courses of X-ray radiation. In fact, I've actually got a picture I could show you what they generated at the end of this procedure. It was a very long laboratory-based procedure where they came up with something that looks nothing like a double helix, nothing like that. And they're not trying to hide it either. If you read the actual study that these guys did, they say themselves, this is what we did. They don't hide it. And we didn't see anything that looks like a double helix, but we're going to model it off what they called a spring at the time.
Yeah.
We said the thing's a bit like a spring, and they used the word model, right? So what's a model? It's not a real thing that exists. This is the human mind. This is the creative part of the human mind that's seen something in its external environment that happens to be human-made, which is kind of funny, I think, because that's what we're actually doing here. Is we're creating something in the laboratory that's an artifact, a synthetic chemical, not a real existing natural molecule. And that would be fine. That would be fine if the authors said that, but they don't say that and they don't present it that way. They present it as if it's a natural existing molecule. It's not a naturally existing molecule. It's synthetic chemistry.
Mm. Yeah, I'm thinking of the engineering processes where you're essentially, creating laws and you're using equations. So using mathematics, but it's you're isolating, you're approximating nature. So nature's happening and you're taking a piece of nature and you're breaking it down into some sort of lines, mechanics, and you're saying this is how it operates. So within these constraints, given X, Y, Z assumptions, within these certain parameters, this is what we expect to happen. So it's trying to isolate a dynamic, moving process of life, and it's kind of making a schematic of it, let's say, within these bounds. But reality doesn't operate that way, and those assumptions are broken some of the time. So I guess um, that's useful. You know, that science is done is for practical purposes, so that we can make shit, so we can get things done. So we can progress technology and um, do practical things in society. That's um, Thomas Kuhn's view of science, which is that it's not about how it should be done. It's just what is done to be able to progress things in society. Um, but yeah, I mean, that speaks to the other perspective, not so prescriptive. Karl Popper's science is what I always talk about. Um, it's about how it should be done, how science should be done. And so it is about trying to disprove the current theory. So it's not assuming that all these things are correct. It's saying, all right, from the starting point, we're going to assume that it's incorrect and we're going to attempt to disprove it. And so there's not the goal isn't to prove it right, it's to prove it wrong. And in academia, often it's funded from certain places that have different interests, and that's how you get the file drawer syndrome, where if it doesn't meet the expectations, or if it doesn't sound good, if it's not what they wanted out of the study, they'll put it away. It doesn't become a known piece of information, it gets hidden, and then obviously it can get tweaked in a different direction and then publicized.
Yeah, in that example, what you're doing is essentially trial and error. And by elimination, by running studies, you run a study and you go, well, that didn't work, or we disproved this, or we disproved that. Over time, you're essentially narrowing down the possibilities. Right? Let me go back to your engineering example for a moment, because I like engineering, right? Because if you build a bridge the wrong way, it falls down, or it doesn't last as long. You get direct feedback pretty quickly that your engineering principles are faulty. How does that play itself out in the medical world? People get sicker. Right? But they might actually live longer, but not because of the medicine that they're getting or the science that's being done. Look, if you look at medical history, if you look at the history of human health, they start getting healthier when you industrialize food. So there's widespread nutrition becoming available. So that's thanks to the farmers, and thanks to the plumbers, they start to remove waste from the living quarters of human beings. So they start removing all the feces and so forth, and urine, and from the living quarters, from cities and so forth. And people start living a lot longer for obvious reasons. What you also notice is when allopathic medicine gets going, this kind of science that I'm talking about, is people live longer, but they have loads more illnesses.
Mm.
So what you're seeing here is the bridge falling down. Right? There is feedback. You can see the feedback. But the problem is this. I'll give you another example. So take this idea of contagion, for example. So you go into a room, you're at a social functioning, and let's say there's 10 people in the room, and there's someone in there that's expressing symptoms. We use words like, oh, the person was sick, or they've got the flu, something like that, right? So what do I mean by that? They're probably running a temperature, they might be sneezing, they got a runny nose, they're coughing. We know what this is, right? What if you go into this room and only 3 other people get sick and 6 people don't? Well, contagion theory, strictly speaking, has been proven wrong, because everybody should get sick. If there's an invisible particle that's being spread around, i.e. a virus, in that room, that everybody in that room can get sick. But they don't, and that's not what happens. Regularly, even in my own house with my partner, she'll be expressing symptoms like that, and I don't get ill. In fact, I haven't been ill for 10 years. And that's an interesting story in itself. But the theory is being proven wrong. So we should just stop there. We should say, okay, well, there's an anomaly here, right? There's an inconsistency to the contagion theory. But that's not what they do. What they do is they'll create a story, an excuse to keep the theory alive. So they'll say something like, oh, you've already had that virus, so you've got immunity to that virus, so you didn't even get sick. They start making excuses to keep the theory alive. That's not science. That's storytelling, right? And anytime anybody hears somebody starting to do that process, they should become very, very critical.
I think that's a major problem. Could call it being an ideologue, or being obsessed with the theory, getting attached to the theory. And even the way we get taught, we were talking before about the way we get educated. You remember things verbatim, you don't question it. You just take it as known. It's saying that it is right, but it should be celebrated and protected and not questioned. The whole goal of science is to prove the theory wrong and then update it. So this is what you would refer to as true science, real science. And the whole thing is really funny. The whole the dogma that's associated with science and the scientific community is how it's what Kuhn would call it, the scientific community. It becomes a cult. It becomes a church.
Yeah.
And I love that because, obviously over time we've moved away from God and Christianity and church, and we've moved towards science. And that is so people like the idea, people who have moved into that world like the idea of shaming or shitting on religious things, religious ideals. And it's okay. No, we're smarter than that now. We're in the science world, and so we've killed God, and with that, we've also killed spirituality, and we've killed wonder and
Meaning.
magic and meaning.
Yeah.
Meaning is probably the most important piece. So we've taken all that. But what's really amusing to me is that we're so attached as a culture, we're so attached to science being the right way and the scientific ideals of the day being the right ones and true, that we're attached, we're dogmatic, we have faith in it.
Well, yeah,
And so
they espouse a belief. They do everything they can to keep that belief alive.
Yeah, and so it's dogma, and so it's exactly the same thing as the clergy of yesterday. The lab technicians are just that today. So, if we think we've evolved from the church days, we're exactly the same. We're devout in a different belief set, and so it's exactly the same thing actually. And so that's I love telling people that who are really dogmatic about the in science of the day, because there's just as much faith in that as there was in the church of yesterday.
There are some similarities, but there's also some differences. All right. So the Christians, for example, since you're talking about faith, they would argue, I'm sure, I'm no theologian, but they would argue that Christ existed, was a real person, and that these stories they tell us are real historical events that occurred. And that's good, right? Because there were people there that saw it. The problem with science is they will regularly talk about things that you can't see, we can't see with our own eyes. Like they separate us from our senses.
Yeah.
Think about it. You can't see the virus. You can't see the DNA with your own eyes. You can't see the vitamins with your eyes. You can't actually use your senses to disprove something or prove it. If I told you that there was such a thing as a tree and it has bark and branches and you find birds in it and so forth, and you wandered around for an hour and you couldn't find anything around you that looked like that, assuming you work in the desert, right? You were in Melbourne, there's plenty of trees around. You would say, Mike, you're full of shit, right? Because you can test it with your own eyes. But the problem with science is they're constantly telling us that things exist that you can't use your senses to prove or disprove.
Yeah.
You have to use I'm going to say senses, I mean your eyes and so forth. You have to use your brain.
There's a focus on theory. There's a focus on theory and not testing. So this is a theory, get carried away with it. So I like to put the perspective. I studied the philosophy of science, and so I saw through doing that, I saw the big picture of science. It's so interesting that I actually studied that within the mainstream education system because it kind of makes a mockery of the whole system, or it definitely shows the susceptibilities, the potential problems with it. And what I took out of doing that was, looking at the evolution of the scientific progression, evolution of science. Um, at every stage, at every stage, the idea is wrong. Every single step of the way, that progression, there's inaccuracy, there's problems with the thinking, there's mistakes, and there's inaccuracy. And I always like to say that it's a model, the schematics we use, the engineering rules that we use, the scientific principles. It's a framework to understand, to map out our world. It's just a map. And we think it's the truth. And we try and protect the map, but it's actually, no, that's not consistent with nature anymore. And we think that's the thing, but it's not. The real world is the thing. And the story is just a story.
Well, we get bound to the concept, get attached to the concepts, to the ideas. Right? I see how that happens.
Every stage, wrong, 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 wrong. And we change it as we go. And then at every stage, we kind of are obsessed with the current theory. Like right now, we think, oh, we're fucking smart. We've got it all worked out. Yeah, and what we think today, that's true. But every week, there's new discoveries, and we go, oh, actually, what we thought was the truth, it's not anymore. It's this, and it's definitely true.
Yeah,
That's the problem.
well, that's part of it.
The problem is the definitely true part. How we attach to it. So,
well, we should hold our ideas lightly, that's for sure. And when we find something that it counters the idea that we've got, we find it normal, we should let that idea go. It becomes something new, right? But that's not what we do. Yes, we do have new discoveries, and we replace those new discoveries with previous discoveries. I don't see that as the problem, though. I think the main problem is that we don't actually properly critique those things, those new discoveries to begin with. And that's what I was saying to begin with. We don't actually have a look at it carefully because we accept it too quickly. Somebody comes out who was supposedly an expert, says we found X, Y, and Z.
that's it. That's
right?
interesting too. Yeah.
So this is the new discovery, but nobody asks any questions about X, Y, and Z. And so they've found another idea, and then another expert comes out and does the same thing. And what they do is they build this massive castle on a bunch of ideas that, in many cases, don't exist. And insights that aren't going to help you. And what you do is you get layers and layers and layers. I'll just say it. Total bullshit. Castles of bullshit.
Yeah. It's an art of persuasion, isn't it? When we hear the language of someone who's a qualified person. We hear all the qualifications, but we're not actually looking at the argument. In philosophy, we look at the argument, but we don't look to that.
Even with these doctors I've worked with for 20 years, for example, I started with vitamin C. Why did I start with vitamin C? Because that's something that people aren't too attached to. So if I tell you there's no such thing as vitamin C, they will actually accept that. They go, yeah, I get that. Like, it's what's in a kiwi fruit. It probably isn't what vitamin C actually looks like. They get it, right? They'll say, yeah, there's lots of chemical processes involved here, and you're not looking at the actual thing. But if you attack DNA, they'll freak out straight away because they're more attached to that idea. They've never considered that it might just be a synthetic chemical and not a naturally existing molecule. They're attached to it.
Yeah.
And they've never thought about themselves. And so when somebody shows them the folly of it all, it's embarrassing because they're supposed to be scientists. They're supposed to be critically appraising individuals. And they're not.
And see, that is Popperian true science. And I think the problem is that we're mistaking true science for dogma, actually. And we're calling it science. Saying, point to the science, here's the science, but it's actually not true science.
Yeah.
It's manipulated, it's distorted, and it's far from the truth. And we're using manipulations. There's a lot of techniques right? And even using those types of words like experts, experts have said X, Y, Z, or you have the news reporter saying it in this particular way, or a scientist um, using all the right words, and that makes it true. And the peer review process, as an example, is something that's like esteemed. Oh, this is peer reviewed, which means that people who are in the same cult, actually, it's pretty harsh, same club, they're all in the same group, same
The
posse,
same knowledge
same
base.
cult. They are in the same group. And if you think differently, you're kind of pushed to the outside or cut from the group. That's a cult. And it's those types of people who have the same assumptions about the world and learning the same institutions as each other,
And they review their own work.
and they review their
Peer-reviewed studies always somebody has exactly the same knowledge base,
yeah.
not somebody like who's scientifically trained but could offer something fresh.
What you want is people with different perspectives from different places in the world, from different experiences, to then have assessed the same idea.
Yeah.
Then it's let's say, a balanced.
Well, it's a better way of critiquing.
It's a balanced analysis.
Yeah.
You get the same people who are with the same ideas that have been educated in the same way. Yeah, they're going to come up with
The same outcomes.
Same outcomes.
Yeah, same
And
inputs, same outcomes.
It's self-perpetuating.
Yeah.
And so we have faith in the expert, but it's not necessarily true.
Yeah, and there's a quite a few problems there actually. So let's say that you're not the expert. So loads of people don't study science or know anything about medicine or engineering or accounting or economics or any of these things, right? And so you defer. Why do you defer?
That is
Defer.
That is a part.
And
It's outsourcing.
I think there's a kind of person that wants to do that, that wants to allow somebody else to tell them what is right, good, and true. Well,
it's easier.
It does make it easy. It's convenient because now you can go and do other things. Now you don't have to discover the world for yourself.
You can put responsibility outside of yourself.
Yeah.
Regardless,
Dr. X told me this, so I'm doing that.
It's too hard. I think the problem is it's perceived as too hard. For someone who hasn't thought, oh, I'm actually responsible and I should make the assessment and this is sort of for myself. And it's always on us in reality.
Oh, of course, because we suffer the consequences.
That's exactly right. If
we
doctors
employ
get
their
it wrong
ideas
and we've done what they've advised, it's our fault.
Yeah.
But to somebody who has been outsourcing their mind essentially for their entire lives and trained to do that, that's a very confronting idea. And that's probably most people, I would say.
Of course, we're encouraged to do that.
We're encouraged to do that. So to then say, oh shit, I'm responsible. Oh, I can't possibly, work this stuff out by myself, which is nonsense, actually. And it's not that hard once you start having it. But it does, the difference is if you've been doing that your whole life and you've been conscious and thinking about that, then you're kind of more developed and you're prepared.
Yeah.
Whereas if someone is, not, hasn't been doing that and has just been essentially outsourcing their brain to the expert, it's easier. It's the easier option. You feel nice and protected, and it's great until you're in the gas chamber, then you're in trouble.
The problem, so take an example where you've got a doctor in the room and you've gone to see this doctor talking about some sort of health problem you think you've got. Let's say you're an accountant. So you've got somebody who spent a long time studying accountant or working in accountant, and a doctor. If you think about doctors, they spend their whole lives studying one thing. All right, they don't actually start working. If you're a specialist, they don't start working full time until they're about 34 years old. Right? So they don't have time for anything else. So you've got two people in the room that have just specialized. Neither one of those people have the broad range of knowledge, concepts, models, techniques, and so forth required to figure out whether or not what they know is true. It's the blind leading the blind.
Yeah, and that's not to say that having specialization can't be useful, but I think the way it's done is not optimal. It's not optimal. And it seems like to me that the purpose is strategically taken into areas and that is not optimal. You know, where you could have a you know, someone who studies a decade, you could have a year or two taken for more of a broad understanding, philosophical take of human nature and uh, human health, and think about all those different things more broadly, and have uh, a much more integrated understanding. You know,
Well, there was a time when people were encouraged to do that. It wasn't that long ago. When people have a diverse range of skills, they would call them autodidacts.
polymaths,
Although, you know, like if you look at it, many of these specialists, you know, experts in their
specialised.
fields, even, you know, artists like Da Vinci, the guy was an engineer and a painter and so forth
yeah,
and so on.
polymath.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So there are certain strengths that come with that kind of knowledge. You can,
Autodidact.
yeah,
Anyway, that means, I think, literally means Latin. It's self-directed, self-taught.
yeah, and creative.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what's kind of not done in our education system in general. It's all this sit back, passive, receive, be told what to do, don't question, don't think for yourself. And yeah, I remember sitting in the like Rocky on my chair at the back of the classroom, and my hand would go up, and I'd always be having a problem with whatever was being discussed, and you know, and it wasn't malicious. I didn't care that much, but I just couldn't buy it.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to go along with it. So you hear the contradictions. It's like, no, what's that?
You're not received positively.
I wasn't received positively.
You're disrupting the
Exactly.
class.
I was disrupting the class.
Just sit there quietly.
Teachers probably like, again, the teachers have been fucked by the system as well, and they're full to the brim, just trying to fucking do what they're told to do in the quota, just like the doctor is full to the brim doing what they are supposed to do.
And now you're pointing out that what they think they know, they don't know. And, you know, you've got that problem again. And it's embarrassing for them because they don't know.
Well, you got so much writing like that.
The issue with doctors is they're paid handsomely to not know.
And I want to put a disclaimer when we start talking like this, because it's not about, the entire discipline and the entire thing is a waste to. It's obviously
that's what makes it difficult, because there is a little bit of truth mixed in.
That's right.
Bullshit.
There's a lot of truth mixed in.
If it was all bullshit, it'd be very easy to go, well, that's all bullshit. But the trouble is, you have to be far more discerning now.
But I think that's the sneaky thing. That's the problem with it. Like, if you do question it and you do say, I know there are problems in the thinking here and we could be better. Like for me, I see a lot of clients come in and they've got terrible mindsets with respect to their own health and what is possible and what can be done. And it's like that because they've had a conversation with a medical professional, and then they're in this place where they're in a bad way, and it's because of the philosophies and because of the ideas that have been and the approach. And so there's a lot that's not considered. There's a lot that's not, done very well. And there's a lot that comes out which is damaging.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot that comes out that's damaging. So
I would say most of it is damaging. I really would. I can give you some of my own experiences, recent experiences dealing with doctors, and they acknowledge it themselves. This isn't just me saying that, you guys are making mistakes. So, for example, I'll give you two examples over the last 5 years, right?
It's systemic.
In my own life where I was coughing up a lot of phlegm, and I wanted to know why I was coughing up so much phlegm. I wanted to know what was in the phlegm.
I drink it too much. Stout, probably.
And so what I did was I didn't actually go and see any doctors. I started calling around the country to see if there was any labs in the country that would take a sample of my mucus and tell me what's in it.
Fucking hell.
Right? I started calling around.
Oh, that's right.
I thought, well, everyone says, well, there's air pollution, right? There's chemicals in the air.
You're saying no one wants to test it.
Hang on, I'll get to that, right? There's chemicals in the air. If no one says there isn't chemicals in the air, everyone says there's chemicals in the air that can make you sick. They're always complaining about pollutants that come from cars and stuff like that. Like, okay, so how do you know that? Surely somebody's taken some mucus, right? Because how do we move chemicals from our body? Well, if they're in your lungs, you cough up mucus. And that's one way in which your body removes chemicals from your body. So from your lungs in this case. So you should be able to take some sample, spin it around, use some spectrometry and go, well, you've got X, Y, Z in your lungs.
Yeah.
Not a single person in this country, and there's not a single laboratory in this country that will do that. Right? They'll tell you that they'll look for viruses and they'll look for bacteria and so forth. But they won't look for something that everybody acknowledges, everybody says is actually there. So there's two problems there. One, they should be looking at it and telling you what's there, because once you find out what's in your lungs, you can do something to avoid it. Why can't you test for something that everybody acknowledges is there? Why can't you look at the thing that's causing the problem? Why do you have to look at all these things, these other things, they call them biomarkers,
what do you think?
that are associated with
Why
it?
don't you? Why are they looking?
Because they don't want you to look at the actual problem.
Why not?
And allopathic practitioners won't do that. They'll look at symptoms and they'll deal with symptoms, but they won't look at the actual thing.
Why?
Because they want to deal with the actual truth of the problems. They don't want to do this. They're good people. But think about this. They're employees of a government, and the government's handing out money, and the government works for other people. There are people that don't want us to be well and make a lot of money from us from not being well.
What's your experience in the medical world? Do you want to tell the listeners about your, just to give a,
Look, I've worked for 20 years in the pharmaceutical industry for multiple companies in different kind of roles, like sales, marketing, training, medical type roles.
Yeah. And so you're essentially influencing doctors on different products.
I work with doctors all the time. Yeah. And see multiple doctors a day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if you go into those rooms with them when they're critiquing studies, they do critique, like I said at the beginning, they do look at, they'll have a study, there'll be a primary objective, they've got to design the study, they will look at it, right? But they don't go far enough. They don't question the concepts, the words that are in the paragraphs. But there's a lot of assumptions that are made. And they don't spend a lot of time doing it. It's always done very quickly, because they have to see patients at work as well, right? So they're not sitting there spending, hours analyzing studies, and they're not looking at
flat out.
They're not looking at the fundamentals.
They're flat out doing other shit.
Yeah.
And the teacher is flat out doing other shit. And all these people in their roles, they're just coping.
Yeah.
That to say, okay, well, now you're going to question the whole philosophy of your entire, working practice and how it might be wrong. Fucking forget about it.
Yeah, that's the problem. We've gone so far now. They've built, there's layers of, it's like an onion. There's just layers and layers and layers.
If you're doing 80 hours a week and you're exhausted, you're just doing, to go and do that, I can understand that. And that's where I think a lot of people are at.
Yeah. The thing is, though, like you were saying earlier, if you spend your life pursuing truth and you know how to go about getting it, then when you've got it, I've noticed a trend. The trend that I've noticed is it's always simple. It's always it's transparent. It's always sensible. It's always very logical. You don't actually need to be trained in a particular area to grasp it.
Yeah.
What happens in these areas, whether it's finance or science or whatever it is they create all these really abstract concepts, this language that becomes impenetrable for somebody that's not trained in the area.
It's just like, in the legal system, you're kind of stuck because you don't know the language, you don't know what any of it means.
So you can't penetrate.
You don't know the rules. Yeah. So it's hard for the layman to penetrate that. It's the same thing with a lot of professions. It's intentionally befuddling.
Yeah. So what you do is you strip it back to its bits and pieces.
Yes.
Right. And you can do that, and it's not hard. And when you expose the bits and pieces, it's very easy to look at. It's like taking apart a transistor radio. Many of us did that when we were kids. Once you see all the bits and pieces, you can see how it works. Right.
Yeah. And that's why I like demystifying things. I like making things as basic and plain as possible. And that's it's not that hard, and it's intuitive as well.
Yeah, it is.
Like logic, it's very clear. It makes sense. When something we know that deep down, when something makes sense, if we use our own minds, it's like it sounds right. And it sounds right because it is right all of the time. And I think there's a lot of you know, deeper intuition. Like there's senses that we have. This is a different topic, but I think we have a lot of senses that are more than just our logical mind as well. And so we're doing a lot of analysis when we're, aligned and we're tuned in. And so we know what is instinctively what is right and wrong. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of misdirection.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like saturation of information,
False
different,
dichotomies.
different
That
terms.
that was abundant in 2020. Like just all the deliberate setup. They set people up to fail. For example, is it a naturally existing virus, or is it something that's made in the lab? That's an example of a false dichotomy. So neither one of those questions are good questions. They're both bad questions, and they're both misleading. And if you spend time thinking about those things, you won't get anywhere. A better question is, how do you demonstrate that something you can't see with your own eyes actually exists? Right? Examine the fundamentals of the proposition that you're being proposed with.
When you mention 2020 and the coronavirus and all that sort of stuff, I instantly think it's really about controlling the discussion.
Yeah.
It's about
Yeah.
controlling the
They
discussion
make
through.
it look like they're trying to help you, right? Let's think about
So
it.
it's
Answer the
very you
questions.
can't yeah, in pure logic in a discussion, your analysis is on the argument, you know, and you're dissecting it and you're pulling it apart to work out the argument. And what I see, what I saw in 2020 as an example is very, you know, there was very directed information. There's a good camp and a bad camp. There's a naughty corner and a good corner. And there's very, you're not allowed to have the discussion.
Yeah.
That is not a democracy.
Yeah.
That is not freedom. That is not freedom of thought. I always use this quote, Aristotle's mark of an educated man is he who can entertain an idea without having to believe it, which is to say, someone who can consider a different perspective that's not theirs. There is so much identity politics today. We want to attach ourselves to the belief, and so with a doctor, let's say, who's, you know, it, if you were to attack the belief that he had about a particular or her had about a particular idea, it's taken as a personal attack. That's part of me. It's my medical knowledge. It's my prestige or whatever it is. It's it's something to do with me. And so when there is a piece of information that gets presented that is contrary to that belief system, it's taken as an attack, a personal attack.
Aristotle was also put to death, right, for corrupting the youth. What was he
Subverting the
actually?
youth.
Subverting the youth. What was he actually doing? He was just teaching them how to think, asking questions and pursuing the answers. But there's some questions that even then you weren't allowed to ask. It upset the lords of the day, or the whatever they call them, then the people who were running ancient Greece.
Control of information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was just as disrupting then as it is now. And all the same games are played now as were played then, to confuse people and to ensure that they don't ask the right questions.
Yeah. I think we need to wake up.
Yeah, just start with one good question. This is my experience. You ask one really good question, and you put the time and effort in required to get an answer, actual answer. And then when you get that answer, you ask another good question that's related, and you just keep going. And it doesn't take long to filter out all the rubbish from the truth. It really doesn't. And once you see it, you'll feel it. Like I had some amazing experiences of inspiration when the truth really settles in. and you learn to recognize the tricks, like the way in which people become confused. You learn to recognize
Logical fallacies, you mean?
yeah, well, yes, and
Different argument.
just the kinds of techniques that are used to confuse, the different kinds of fraud, um, because they're similar techniques that are used, and that it's not just one field like science. We're talking mostly about science today that uses these. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's everywhere, and so you know, I just smile when I again, and I see it everywhere. I see these things in finance and economics. I see them everywhere. Um,
Mhm.
and when I see things like that so consistently, I just naturally conclude that it's deliberate. I don't think it's a mistake.
I think we're naive in general. I think we're naive in general. You know, when I think about like the dating world and the problems that are in that environment, I think a lot of the time people are is that we're taking what people say at face value, and we're trusting that what people say is the truth. When it's anything but. I mean, there's all sorts of management of the situation, management of perception. There's all sorts of lies going on all the time, the whole time.
Well,
Most,
they're probably trying to present themselves in a positive fashion.
of course, there's heaps of different
understandable.
reasons. Heaps of different reasons.
That's
So it's
that's not necessarily sinister. That's just I want to present my best self. If you know what I mean.
look, yeah, exactly. I think in most cases it's a self-serving thing, and whether that's like you know very sinister or the person's intentionally like there are some psychopaths out there that are intentionally trying to fuck people up, but I think for the most part it's self-interest, self-preservation. People are concerned with how they look, and they don't want to. A lot of the time, it's people are scared of conflict,
Yeah.
and so they don't want the discussion. They don't want it because they don't want to face a hard situation.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
And so I see it everywhere. So I think as a culture, we just need to get smarter and just see how
Courageous.
just more courageous. We see how much we're being lied to, and it it might sound like pessimistic to have that perspective, but it is just the truth. And so if that is happening, and that is what we're not in this world where everyone is transparent. You think about the corporate environment, there is just game on game on game. There's a lot of lying going on. And that's okay. As long as you understand that, then you're not led to the slaughter. You can, if you're going to be in that environment, at least
You're equipped to deal with it.
you're equipped to handle the situation, at least. So I think we just need to become just more conscious and not so, blindly trusting. And that doesn't mean that we need to be pessimistic either.
No,
A lot of,
quite the contrary.
we can still have, really good thoughts for the future and, be open and open to positive things and open to good connections and all that sort of thing. And, but don't be an idiot.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? And I think our culture in general is, especially in Australia, I think we're just very much we say the good thing. We don't look at the dirty thing. We don't want to look at that truth.
I don't like conflict.
That's why my podcast is called The Uncomfortable Truth. Because since I was a kid, rocking on the back of my chair, I was always just, what is that? Like there it is.
Yeah.
And that's the uncomfortable thing, but that's the fucking truth, and that's what we need to look at if we want to not be, absolutely abused.
I find Australian culture quite intriguing, actually, and kind of funny.
Oh,
I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody who trusts the government, right? But and when the government does something that's good, they go, great, well, they got that right. But when they do something that's bad and does a lot of harm, what they say is, oh, they just made a mistake. But they make a lot of mistakes, and they've got a lot of people around them, experts in their field, who they can get advice from. So when they make a decision to do X, Y, or Z, they know what the outcomes are. So why do we say when they do something that's good, oh, that's good, they know they're smart people doing the right thing, but when they do something that causes a lot of harm, well, that was an error. Why don't we just say, well, maybe that was deliberate too?
I think there's an ego kick. There's definitely an ego kick in the politicians being dumb. It's like, oh, they're such idiots. Look at them. Oh, it's so dumb. But that is assuming that their intention is to do the right thing and that they're being honest about what they're doing. But it's anything but that. It seems like it's orchestrated and it's intentional. I don't think the things that are happening are accidental, because these individuals have all the power and they're just dumb. No, I think it's managed. So yeah,
Carefully planned and timed, and it seems like both parties, the major parties, sail the boat in the same direction.
and I always, I'll hear my family members or friends or just people in general, they get worked up. There's a lot of attention, there's a lot of energy going into the news, going into these things. And it's like, that is a lot of wasted energy on the wrong thing, because it's like a distraction. It's like sucking all your energy. And a lot of people at the moment are getting stressed and getting anxious.
Isn't that the real purpose of the news?
Well,
isn't that supposed to make you feel that way?
I mean, it could be.
The world is a dangerous place.
Every time I look at it, I feel bad. So I'm just going, no, I need to be informed. And these
oh, I just need to look smart when I go to work today, such because I know what the current events are. And I know what the right thing to say is as well.
Yeah,
because whatever the news, for a certain generation, I don't see that so much in my generation, but I think my parents' generation, you have to say the right thing, and the right thing is whatever the ABC people. So
the ABCs. Right.
Yeah, go
SBS, BBC, ABC. Yeah. That is, and it's almost like a status thing to said in the right way and the right words.
I think people understand now that they're being lied to. The trouble is that the worst damage is done by the stories that are not shared. It's the stories that they are offering, like people can look at them and say, oh, that's rubbish. But it's the questions that aren't asked and the stories that aren't shared that provide the most illumination about what's really going on. They're just not there, and they've never been there.
Said recently, the Alan Baton philosopher, he says it's some news directed very negative. You hear in the background, it's like death and stabbing.
I think he's getting at something else though, isn't he? It's just some news.
What he's saying is that it's focused on particular things. There's a shitload of things going on in the world. And it's directing to that.
Yeah. So the question to ask is, why they show me this?
That's right.
And what else is going on that I could be looking at?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I mean, in this, we've kind of drifted to a different topic, but there is.
It's the same theme. We're talking,
misdirection and information and
knowledge and truth, and how to identify falsehood.
That's right. It was funny. I mentioned saying like the devices are bad information. The good old days of the Channel 9 nightly news. Oh, this is where we got the good old days. We can't trust this. And this is, of course, there's a lot of control around how that information.
It's intriguing how they're going after the children as well. So people under 16, they're the ones at most risk as well. So they have to have an ID to get online.
Your safety.
Yeah, that's right. We're concerned about the ideas that we're being exposed to.
Protect the children. Care about the children.
No, in reality, we just don't want all our bullshit stories to collapse. And we don't want a whole generation of kids, because of the internet, You'll
being
actually
able to think
know
for themselves
what's going
discovering
on.
new
Yeah,
information.
yeah,
Yeah, access to that. It's dangerous.
yeah. It
Yeah,
was.
and in any case, I've been saying it's so saying that we need to be protected because we can't think for ourselves and that it's dangerous to be exposed to different beliefs.
Yeah. Oh, it's hate speech if you actually
It's hate.
if you say something that shocks somebody.
So but this is really slippery slope
Oh, no
stuff
shit.
because hate speech. Once you say that, you can turn anything into hate speech, and then
What's the theory?
you're controlling information. You're controlling what's allowed to be said and what's not. Yeah. So that all of this controls on what we are exposed to. I have faith that we can assess information and we can um, work things out for ourselves, and we can have them. And the more that we're exposed to different ideas, the better we get. And if we do get fleeced, we'll learn.
Mm.
You know, and then we can stand on our own feet and be sharp thinkers, and then we'll know the bullshit when we see it. And that's not what you want if you want to be able to control people.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
And so,
And if you're benefiting from them not knowing.
so I just think it would be the wrong way to go if you were concerned with the strength of the mind of the citizen.
Not long, and I've obviously left now, but not long ago, it was probably 12 months ago, I was at our office in Sydney, and we had a specialist, a gastroenterologist, coming to present,
Mhm.
and he was talking about inflammatory bowel disease. Right? What's inflammatory bowel disease? Essentially, it's inflammation in the bowel, somewhere in the bowel. If it's in the small intestine, they call it Crohn's. It's in the large intestine, they call it colitis. You see, right? Ulcerative colitis. And he gave this, I don't know, 45-minute presentation on the illness. And at the end of it, I said to him, have you guys ever thought about taking a sample from the inflamed area, the lining of the intestine, and finding out what's causing the inflammation? You know, taking the mucosa and finding out what kind of chemicals have been absorbed by the mucosa and hence what's causing the inflammation. And he said to me, that's a really good idea. No one's ever done that. But they do the opposite. They've got a model that tells them that the inflammation is caused by the body attacking itself. Think about that. The body's obviously designed wrong. It's fundamentally flawed.
Yeah. So this is the
And it's attacking itself.
Yeah, no.
It's not attacking a foreign entity that's causing a problem.
Yeah. I think there's a big problem with that as well. I think the body is a self-correcting system, and it's actually smart. It's smart, and it's doing things to heal itself constantly. Yeah, and these things that happen, like cancer, and these are all solutions.
Yeah,
they're actually solutions to the problem.
Can we talk about cancer? I'll give you
Maybe-
just another good example there. Quick example.
Sure.
Yeah. So tumors, right? It's another example. They say the cells aren't functioning properly. They create this mass, they're mutated, they create a mass. And if they assemble in an organ that's really important, well, the organ won't function properly and will die, right?
Yeah.
I'll give you a metaphor before I tell you what's probably going on. You want to clean the floor in your house. So let's say you've got a tiled floor, you get your broom and your dustpan, you sweep up all the dust into little piles, and then you get your dustpan, you pick it up and you throw it out the window, right? Or you put it in the rubbish bin. You throw it over your neighbour's backyard if you don't like them much, right? So that's how you remove dirt from your house.
Out the window.
Is it possible that your body's doing exactly the same thing
from the third floor?
Yeah. Is it possible that your body's just trying to get rid of all these nasty chemicals that are in your food, in your air, in the air, in the water, and so forth, and it can't get rid of them? And when it metastasizes, i.e., these tumors are found elsewhere, it's not the cells going wrong and behaving inappropriately. You've just exposed to more of these chemicals, and so what the cells are trying to do is bound them up and get them out of the way. Sometimes they put them in a spot that causes the problems.
Yeah.
That to me makes a hell of a lot more sense than, no, you just weren't designed right. Your body's flawed.
Exactly.
And it's malfunctioning on its own. There's no insight. It's caused it.
We've talked about the double slit experiment and how our consciousness affects reality and affects matter. And when we think about that in the context of health and like, thinking about ourself, like our bodies as incompetent at attacking itself and, oh, I'm sick and like, this is not good. It doesn't mean be naive and not do things that are, practically push you in the right direction. But uh, a lot of these perspectives are damage,
Nasty. They're nasty. They're
damaging.
quite nefarious if you think about it.
Oh,
Because you're saying the body's faulty. The world is
the
dangerous.
word is
You're not
dangerous.
designed for this place.
Yeah, and there's a lot of ideas like that. So I think when there's any ideas which make us feel weak and like we're broken or there's no meaning in our lives and we're just, chemicals reacting, anything that takes away our humanity, anything that takes away our divinity and our ability to heal and our strength and that kind of thing, anything that goes down that line, we should be instantly questioning. That's not good
Well,
stuff.
well, this is the issue. If I go back to inflammatory bowel disease for a moment, they don't do anything that enables healing. The drugs that are given to these people with Crohn's or colitis don't enable healing. They just quell the symptoms. But the symptoms, like, so for example, the symptoms for diarrhea for colitis and Crohn's. So if you've got one of those two illnesses, you get diarrhea. Why? Because your body's trying to flush these chemicals that are absorbed in your mucosa, trying to get rid of it. And it's probably so embedded in your mucosa that it just can't get rid of it.
Mm.
But that's one of the ways in which the body copes. It's just try and get it out. So they'll give you drugs that will quell the inflammation, which is the body trying to get rid of this damn thing, whatever it is, and they actually undermine the healing process.
Mm.
But then you feel a little bit better because you don't have the symptoms. You say, "Well, problem solved."
Yeah, and so that's
But
another
the problem's not solved.
symptom management instead of cause management.
Yeah,
And so we don't look, we don't say
you're
why.
not even allowed to look.
No.
So when they do an endoscopy, I'll just stick on this for a minute because this is really quite revealing.
Okay.
So when they do an endoscopy, and they find a polyp, right? This is a place where the inflammation is so bad that you get a growth on the lining of your intestine,
Mhm.
right? They'll chop off the polyp. There are different ways of doing that, and they'll send it off to be analysed, right? But they don't analyse it to see if there's any toxins or chemicals in there causing inflammation. They only look at the cells. Again, it's the cells that must have malfunctioned and caused the problem. And so what they'll do is they'll look at different kind of the way the cells change and how they look, the
Yeah.
form of the cell, and then they'll give it a name. They characterize. They go, oh, this cell it looks like X, or this cell looks like Y, and then they'll tell you whether that's a dangerous cell or not.
Yeah.
So the focus is on the cell. But the cell is just changing form to deal with whatever the problem is.
Yeah.
It's your body adapting to deal with the issue. But they don't present it that way. They say your cells are malfunctioning. They're not malfunctioning. The cells are doing exactly what they were designed to do. The body's been intoxicated with something harmful and they're trying to deal with it. But they don't look at it that way at all. They look at it in exactly the opposite, the inverse. They look at it exactly the opposite way.
Mhm.
Which is disturbing. And it's not the only example. I could talk for hours
No.
about all the examples.
Yeah. So yeah,
It's
there's lots of examples of that. But yeah, I think generally uh, when there is this undercurrent of there is a problem with the body, it's a mistake and that it's inherently problematic and wrong and that the process that's happening is a mistake. I think that's alarm. That's a red flag for me.
Mm.
That there's something wrong with the theory there. I think everything that the body does is one at a certain level. It is adaptive. It's healing. It's trying to heal. It's trying to deal with the situation. It's actually the solution.
It doesn't fail without some kind of insult. So how about we spend some time identifying and being honest about what the insults are?
And looking at those, probably behavioural things and even mental, emotional complexes and all of those things that contribute in more subtle ways.
Somebody tells you that your body isn't designed well and it's going to fail. You start stressing, yeah? And what kind of impact does that stress have on the way your body functions?
About how consciousness affects matter. Like you can tell that to a person, that's going to have a negative consequence in most circumstances. It doesn't mean you have to delude a person.
No.
And be honest and realistic and give them ways to help themselves. But to give them pessimistic, I've had people in tears. When I tell them You're okay. You're going to be all right. Like, you're fine. And then they break down because they've been through a medical system where they've been so frightened by what they've been told,
Yeah.
which is nonsense,
Yeah.
that they're just like paralyzed. So what's this system doing to people?
Yeah,
What the
the effect it
fuck
has.
is going on?
Yeah. It's only been around a short period of time, and it's done a lot of harm in the time that it's been.
What do you mean?
In this form of medicine, allopathic medicine,
Mm.
you're only talking about 140 years or something. And even in most parts of the world, it's employed in to different degrees in different places.
Yeah, at very least, we should be, questioning things and being able to have the discussion, with the peer review process, starting to think outside of the established correct perspectives.
There are people that can help.
Uh,
There are people that can
we
help.
need to start questioning things in general,
Yeah.
whether it's the news or whether it's the experts. And we need to start trusting, I think, ourselves. I think questioning things and just being a bit more conscious and not being so naive to our surroundings.
And not being so attached to our ideas as well, because when you start
Mhm.
asking good questions, you kind of find out that a lot of the things you
Mhm.
think are true are not true.
That's right.
And so you got to
Willingness, a
develop
willingness to let go of bad old ideas.
even a humor, like a sense of humor for it.
There's a distance.
You know what I mean?
There's a healthy distance from it, isn't there? Where you can kind of laugh at yourself
Yeah.
and be like, okay, well,
Yeah. I thought that was right. But it's not right.
I thought that was fine.
Yeah.
And that's, you talk about rate of evolution, that's directly, I would say, correlated to our ability to let things go.
That's right. Put it down.
And that's put it down.
Put it down.
That's true with our mental and emotional patterns as well. It takes willingness to get that distance, laugh at ourselves and go, oh, fuck, I can change.
Yeah.
Give some breathing room. So yeah, a belief is a contract. So being able to put it down. Anyway, I think I'll leave it there. It's a good summary. We've been talking about a lot of different topics and we will, if you're keen. So yeah, we might do a little bit more specialized topics if we want next time. But I appreciate your time. So thanks for the discussion.
Love talking to you, though.